Welcome to all of our schools, POPI-Portal training, 4 of 7.
Right, Michelle. Good morning, Michelle. Good morning to all our delegates. We are doing POPI-Portal training 4 of 7 today, focusing on legal collections as well as compliance.
But Peter, before we get into all of this POPI-Portal legal stuff, we've got an announcement.
Oh yes, please share with us.
So we've got a reveal, actually. We did our schools survey, our annual school surveys, and thank you to all of the schools who participated. We did it to primary schools, high schools, public schools, private schools, early learning development schools. Fascinating insights.
Can only imagine, Michelle.
So one of the questions that we asked was, did COVID impact your school?
Yes.
And no surprises that the schools responded to say the private schools predominantly severely or seriously agree with that statement, and our public schools absolutely agree with that statement.
Yes.
So COVID did impact our learners in terms of the academic year for 2020.
Of course, yeah.
The next question that we asked, and we changed the question a little bit from the previous year, because we felt that finances would have come under severe strain simply by looking at the payment profile of school parent payment profile. And we can see that in August, only 45% of parents were paid up with their school fees in August of last year.
That's very little, Michelle.
So that's less than 1 in 2 parents that were able to stay up with their school fees. And it slowly improved coming back towards the December period. But our payment profile for our schools, which we collect on 1,000 schools around the country, was sitting at 60% by December of last year. So only 60% of parents were up to date with their school fees by the end of the year. So as a result, we knew that school fees were going to be, fee collection was going to be under severe strain.
Yes.
So the question that we asked, were you as a school able to keep to your monthly expenditure budget, or did you have to have cutbacks?
Okay.
And if there were cutbacks, where were those cutbacks? So 31% of the schools responded and said we were able to manage to pay our monthly expenses without having to do any cutbacks, either on the fees that we received or in terms of the savings that we had. So 31% of schools responded to say we didn't have to cut back. That leaves 69% of schools saying that they did have to cut back. So the cutbacks that were felt in our private schools, 44% responded to say that their cutback was in payroll.
Oh no, and that affects everything at the end of the day.
Well, once your teachers and your admin staff and your coaches aren't earning an income, they're not able to participate in the economy. So there's a knock-on effect. 5% of schools said that there were retrenchments.
Oh no.
In our public schools, the cutback was more in the capital expenditure and then in payroll. So payroll again. Where there was an impact in payroll, we then asked our schools what category of was it your educators, was it your teachers, was it your admin staff, was it your coaches, was it your groundsmen? And in actual fact, the category of payroll that was the most severely affected was permanent teachers.
Oh no, yes.
And that, of course, the impact there results in bigger classroom sizes.
Of course, yes.
Right? So this is the preliminary data. We'll still do a full report and feedback early in May.
Wonderful. In the next couple of weeks, we'll have all those results available to all our schools.
Back to the reveal.
Yes.
So the school that, and again, thank you to all the participants, the school that has won the 10,000 Rand for participating in the TPN school survey for 2021 is a school in Joburg.
Yes, a school in Johannesburg, primary or high school.
Primary school, 1,232 learners.
So big school.
Peter, who's the school?
It is Alberview Primary School this year.
Well done, Alberview. We will do a proper check handover when all the schools are back from leave.
Yes.
Or school holidays, and the classrooms are open, and we can come over and do a proper check handover for that particular prize.
Wonderful, and thank you once again to all our schools for participating in that. It really does give us great insight into, and not just us, obviously you as well, into what's currently busy happening with the schools market out there.
And with your peers.
Yes.
100%. Right. Back to the POPI-Portal, Peter,
Michelle,
because we've got some important dates.
We do. We've got the important date, obviously, as all of you know, of the 1st of July, that the POPI Act is actually becoming effective. So the entire Act needs to be taken into consideration. It needs to be implemented at your organization, at your school from that date. But we've also got prior dates that speak to regulatory processes and what you need to do before the implementation. One of those is Regulation 4, speaking about your information officers and deputy information officers, not just their rights and responsibilities, but how you go and register them through the information regulator. We do have some more information for you on that. From the 1st of May, the online portal will be available through the information regulator so that you can go and register your IOs, information officers, and your deputy information officers. But before that actually occurs, you also need to perform a personal information impact assessment, which the TPN POPI-Portal, as we've done through the last 4 or 3 modules, doing today as well, is going to show you how to perform that personal information impact assessment at your organization. And that actually needs to occur before the effective date of 1 July.
So by 1 May, the portal at the information regulator will be available for the information officers to be registered, and that's a requirement.
Yes.
You have to register your information officer at the regulator.
Correct.
And the information officer, who would that be, Peter?
It is a person at executive or management level at the organization. So it's going to have to be a person quite high up at the school that needs to perform all the duties in terms of Regulation 4 and in terms of the Act, but also needs to be registered at the information regulator as the information officer for the school.
So the CEO or someone of that level, but the deputy information officer can be someone not at that level.
Correct, Michelle, 100% right.
Okay,
yes.
Perfect. And that would be somebody that would then be doing the administrative components of the of completing your personal information impact assessment.
Correct. What they say in the regulations is you're, depending on the size, structure, and capacity of the organization, you're either going to appoint a deputy information officer or not. So it might not be necessary for our smaller schools out there, but perhaps for our bigger schools who do have a lot of regulatory processes and a lot of POPI implementation that they need to do, you might need to appoint a deputy information officer as well.
100%. So Peter, you what are the functions that we're going to be dealing with today on the personal information impact assessment?
We are dealing with the function of legal on the POPI-Portal system, and we're going to go through the sub-functions of legal collections as well as compliance at the organization.
Fantastic. So with us in studio today, Peter as an attorney, but also we've got Jade Mthembu, who's an attorney at TPN. And she's going to be facilitating the questions and answers.
Yes, and hopefully interrupting me while I speak.
Fantastic. So in order to ask your questions in the session, please do log into YouTube so that you can then participate in the chat function. Put your questions into the chat. Jade will then be facilitating, asking Peter the questions as they become relevant in the session.
Yes.
And we'll also have 15 minutes Q&A at the end. So if the question is more of a general question, then we can ask that question right at the end.
Perfect. Remember, to all our delegates, we are putting out that feedback form during the 15-minute Q&A. It's going to be available for 45 minutes thereafter as well. So for an hour, that feedback form will be available to you. Go and click on the bit.ly link. Go and fill those out for us, please. It's vitally important, not just for our own feedback, but also for your own feedback throughout the sessions.
Fantastic. And then lastly, if the screen is blurry, there's a cog on the video bottom right-hand corner. So if you click on the cog on the bottom right-hand corner of the video, click on settings, and then change your quality setting to 720p, a minimum of 720p. Rather don't use auto, minimum of 720p, and that'll make everything unblurry. Peter, I'm going to hand over to you. You're going to take us through the personal information impact assessment. Jay's going to facilitate Q&A.
Thank you very much, Michelle.
Thank you very much.
All right, folks, let's jump straight into the TPN POPI-Portal training, module 4 of 7, the legal function on the system. Before I get started, like we always do, I'm just going to go through a little bit of the functionality of the system on the left-hand tab so that you know what all of these indicators mean. First of all, just starting off, go into your settings. You're more than welcome to follow with me today as well. If you're re-watching this afterwards, remember these YouTube videos are available throughout the TPN Credit Bureau YouTube channel. You can go and re-watch them and follow with me as we go through the actual system training. So once you click on settings, please make sure that your company type is set at schools. You'll notice that it's set as public and private. Currently our company structure is private. The company name, TPN, company size, and number of pupils. This is very important also for your own purposes, just knowing how the system is set up so that you know you're correctly set up and you're answering the correct questions in terms of your personal information impact assessment. We also have run this specifically on our case study. Our case study had 30 employees and 200 learners or 200 parents. So remember, just click save and it's going to save those settings for you. The next one that I just want to access is this staff function over there. You will notice that I am set up as the only person performing these duties in terms of the personal information impact assessment. Basically, the information officer is going to run through these questions in terms of the personal information impact assessment and the POPI-Portal training. Then through your action plan, you can go and add actions yourself to this function so that you know, going through your personal information impact assessment, the different functions, that you've got certain actions that you need to perform. You'll see I have added one for today, which I will go back to after I have run through the full legal function, the compliance, and the legal collections. The next thing that I just want to show you is this policies tab. Now, once I go click on that, it is going to open up all the policies and procedures that you can implement as an organization, as a school, in your current day-to-day functioning. And these range all the way from acceptable usage policies, code of conducts that you can add to your employment agreements, information privacy agreements, quality policies, physical and environment security policies. If you've got a website, all of those privacy policies and terms and conditions are also loaded for you through the system. So you can download them in Word, go and change them up, add your logos. If there's something that's not applicable to you, or you find that you need to go and add something to the policy, you're more than welcome to go and do so. There's also all your other documents, which includes your request forms, your training registers, as well as your user declarations, should a person be using their own device at the school specifically. Now, moving into your personal information impact assessment, and the main portion of the TPN POPI-Portal is going to be this. You need to answer all of these questions under your overview, taking into consideration the different functions at your school, starting with governance, moving through to finance, human resources, information technology, operations, the legal function that we're going to go through today, and your sales and marketing. To access the legal function, click on Review All Indicators. Legal includes external legal actions and compliance with laws and regulations. It also includes compliance with policies and procedures. I'm going to start off today with the compliance sub-function, moving into the legal collections. But before I head into that, just note that this is legal collections. What that means is if you need to take further legal action, or if you need to send your files through to an external third party like a debt collector to collect this money for you, this is where this sub-function is actually currently sitting under. If you'll remember, and if you go back to the previous training sessions, we did do a training on finance. And when we went through finance, we actually went through the debtors sub-function, which specifically speaks to the internal processes and how you manage your debtors at the school internally. So to go into the compliance sub-function, click on the review button right over there. Select the accountable person first. It's going to be myself. The progress status is assigned and the due date. Let's just make it simple. Let's make it for the 30th of April. Remember to click save. You can go out of this POPI-Portal system, the TPN POPI-Portal system, but if you click save, you can go and access these sub-functions once again, and you can go and fill out where you stopped last time. So remember to click save as you're going along. So when we're talking about the personal information that's captured in compliance, let's just first read the compliance descriptor. Compliance officer is an employee of a company that ensures the firm is in compliance with its outside regulatory and legal requirements, as well as the internal policies and bylaws. Compliance officers have a duty to their employer to work with management and staff to identify and manage regulatory risk. So what we're talking about here is regulatory processes and regulatory risk, both internal and external. So if you need to comply with certain pieces of legislation, with certain bylaws, with certain code of conducts, perhaps even at your school, however you've been registered, you need to fill out your compliance section in accordance with that. You need to take that into consideration. What type of personal information are you processing through the regulatory compliance procedure? So the volume of personal information being processed in this function, remember we're using our case study, that school with 30 employees as well as 200 parents or learners. The volume of personal information being processed in this function, our school mentioned they had a low amount of personal information processed. Does it contain sensitive personal information? Now, if you're unsure what sensitive personal information is, what special personal information is, what information around the GDPR citizens are, you can go and click on this information tab. They're going to open up little wikis for you, which is going to explain exactly what that term actually means. So I'm going to go into personal information, I'm going to go into special personal information, and I'm going to go into personal information of European citizens GDPR. I've already clicked these links so that they open up the wiki tabs and they look like this. So let's read through personal information first. Sensitive personal information is information that can identify the data subject. This can include information such as the data subject's ID numbers, bank account details, individuals or juristic. Very important. Remember, when we're talking about processing of data subjects information, we're not just talking about natural people, we're talking about juristic entities, which are your companies, closed corporations, trusts, partnerships, etc. in terms of POPI and tax numbers. Moving into your special personal information. What is special personal information? Special personal information is defined in terms of section 26, and it includes race, sex, pregnancy, color, sexual orientation, physical or mental health, religion, medical history, criminal history, biometric information, trade union membership, and political persuasions. Very important to read through this, because possibly through your regulatory processes, including something like your broad-based black economic empowerment, your BEE, there's a possibility that some of this information is going to be special. And then moving into the final one that we're going to move through is your GDPR. The General Data Protection Regulation is a legal framework that sets out guidelines for the collection and processing of personal information from individuals who live in the European Union. It's possible that through both your compliance as well as your collections, you might have information on GDPR or European citizens. So we need to go and have a look at that. You need to contextualize that in your own school and see whether you're processing data subjects information that falls under any of these three categories. So going back into this, does it contain sensitive personal information? Most probably it is going to through your regulatory compliance. We selected, or rather our case study selected yes. Does it contain special personal information? Our case study also selected yes on this. Does it contain information regarding children? They selected no on this category. And does it contain personal information on European citizens? And they selected yes. Some of their educators are actually European Union citizens, and they clicked save. The information and where it is processed. So where is it actually saved on your system, and what checks and balances do you currently have in place? That is the control measures question on the next section. The system where the personal information was stored, specifically when it came to the regulatory compliance, was on the server. Was it paper and electronic? It was both paper and electronic, and the level of access control that our school selected was high. The control measures that are in place to reduce the risk of this information coming into the hands of third parties, they also went and selected. They said for these regulatory compliance procedures, they had checklists in place. They had electronic as well as physical access control. Remember, if you scroll over these buttons, it is going to give you examples of what these two tags and what all of these tags actually mean. And then they had specific staff training on regulatory compliance, and they clicked save. Now, when it comes to the important questions, you need to take into consideration the 8 pillars of lawful processing in terms of POPI. To make sure that you understand that, go and click on the information tag that says, is the processing of personal information taking place lawfully? If you go and access that wiki, it is going to open up a page that looks like this, and it's going to explain to you what the 8 pillars of lawful processing in terms of POPI are. They are accountability, processing limitation, purpose specification, further processing limitations, information quality, openness, security safeguards, and data subject participation. So once you understand that, that first question really does start to make sense. Are we processing the personal information lawfully? Our school said yes, they are. Is the processing of personal information done in a reasonable manner so that it doesn't infringe on the data subject's privacy? They also selected yes on that one. Have you applied the rule of minimality? So you're not processing more information through your regulatory compliance procedure than is what actually needed, and they selected yes. Is the collection of personal information being done for a specifically and defined purpose? Yes, most certainly, in this case it was. And have you obtained consent from all data subjects in this area where it is considered mandatory according to the Act? This is also one of those that I would go click on the wiki for almost on each and every single section, because then you know when consent is actually required to process the personal information. So when I go click on that, it's going to open up a wiki page like this. How do you know if you need consent from clients and if it is mandatory? Personal information may not be processed without consent unless any one of the factual scenarios in section 11 of POPI is applicable. If any of the factual scenarios is present, consent is not needed. The factual scenarios include if it is required to conclude or perform a contract, the party processing the information, the responsible party, is required to do so by law, most probably through your regulatory compliance. All of these this subcategory is going to come to the forefront. You might need to process personal information because it's required by law to fulfill your regulatory compliance procedures. The processing protects its legitimate interest of the consumer. The processing is necessary for the performance of a public law duty, or it is done pursuit of the legitimate interests of the responsible party. So once again, if I go back into my TPN POPI-Portal, that wiki sits right over there under consent. Our schools selected yes, they have obtained consent where it is necessary, and clicked save. The data usage questions once again take into consideration these 8 pillars of lawful processing. We're just asking a little bit further into the processes that you are busy using. Do you notify the data subject as required by POPI when collecting personal information from them directly? Our case study said yes. Has the retention and restriction of records been formalized in this area? They do have a retention and destruction policy in place already. Remember, that policy already forms part of the TPN POPI-Portal. You can access that through the policies tab and implement that at your school. Is personal information in this area used for another purpose? They said no, it is not. And have you ensured that the personal information in this area is updated? They do so on a yearly basis. Are you satisfied that the appropriate security measures are in place to ensure confidentiality, integrity, and availability of personal information? Our school selected partially on this. I'm going to go back into the action plan to show you what I have done to make sure that when we do select partially, no, don't know, not applicable, you go and add these certain things to your action plan to know that you need to perform this duty to make sure that you're 100% compliance when it goes to your security safeguards, your access, whatever it might be, or you just need to implement certain policies and procedures in your business. Say, for example, this retention and destruction. Go and add it to your action plan so that you know you still need to perform this duty. But they selected partially and clicked save. Now, when we go back into the legal function, you'll notice that these have been populated. What we can see is there's an inherent risk, a residual risk, and a behavioral risk. Now, your inherent risk is obviously captured from the questions that we asked right at the front of that subfunction. How much information you're processing and what type of personal information are you processing through the subfunction. We can see that the inherent risk is medium. The reason for that is they've got quite a low volume of personal information that they're processing through the subfunction, but it does contain sensitive personal information, special personal information, as well as information on GDPR citizens. The residual risk is low because we've got certain control measures already in place to make sure that we are being POPI compliant. And then the behavioral risk, taking into consideration the 8 pillars of lawful processing in terms of POPI, also low because we answered a lot of those questions in the affirmative. So moving through to your legal collections, go and click review, and once again it's going to open up a similar page to what we had on the compliance. When doing legal collections on tenants or debtors, you may need to share personal information about the nature or about the natural or juristic person you are collecting from. The amount of personal information used in collections may be less than normal debtors, but may be more sensitive. Needs to be taken into consideration. Once again, select the accountable person, myself. Progress status is assigned, and we're going to choose the same date. and click Save. Personal identifiable information. Same questions than what we had on the compliance subfunction. The volume of personal information being processed in the subfunction. This is all very relative, and it's relative to your actual school or organization. Because we had 200 parents in our case study, and obviously not all of those parents are being handed over for legal collections, they mentioned that the volume of personal information that is being processed as a result of the subfunction is going to be medium. Does it contain sensitive personal information? And remember, these could include ID numbers, bank details, etc. And they selected yes. Does it contain special personal information as defined in terms of POPI? They selected no, there isn't special personal information processed through legal collections. Does it contain information regarding children? Just going to stop here for a moment. There are many schools that add the children's details to the invoice, perhaps to their data management system, to their pastel system. Once you're doing that, you are actually processing information on children. In our case studies case, the parents were loaded as the debtors, loaded through their DMS or through their pastel system as well as on their servers. So through their legal collections, they weren't processing information of the children. But it's very possible through your own processes on legal collections, you might be processing that information. So they selected no, but you need to go and have a look at your own school. Does it contain personal information on European citizens? And once again, they selected yes, they were collecting, or rather legally collecting, that money from parents who were European citizens, and click Save. The system where the personal information is stored, I've already pre-populated this for you. Server, DMS, and pastel. Is it paper and electronic? It's both. And the level of access control is medium. Very important when we get to our action plan. Remember this, I've marked medium on this one. Our case study marked medium. The control measures that are in place. So the control measures to mitigate the risk of this information actually getting out there. They had policies and procedures in place. They had checklists in place. They had both electronic and physical access control. And they had monthly reporting on their processes here. Click Save. Once again, important questions, deals with the 8 pillars of lawful processing. Not going to go through those wikis again. You can all go through them throughout your own personal information impact assessment when you're doing this yourself. Is the processing of personal information taking place lawfully? Yes, it is. Is the processing of personal information done in a reasonable manner? Yes. Have you applied the rule of minimality? Yes. Is the collection of personal information done for a specific and explicitly defined purpose? Yes, it is. Have you obtained consent? Yes, we have in terms of our contracts with the parents. Click Save. Data usage questions. Do you notify the data subject as required by POPI when processing or collecting personal information? Yes, we do. Have the retention and restriction of records been formalized in this area? Yes. Is personal information in this area used for another purpose? No, it is not. Have you ensured that personal information in this area is updated on a regular basis? Yes, we make sure, once again, yearly. And are you satisfied that the appropriate security measures are in place to ensure confidentiality, integrity, and availability of personal information? Our case study selected partially on this one. They need to go and have a look at if their internal procedures, their security measures are in place to ensure the confidentiality, integrity, and availability of that personal information. Go and click Save once again. And then going back to our legal function, you can see how this has changed. Interesting. Even though we selected there was a low or rather a medium risk when it is involved with the inherent risk. Remember, on this one we selected low, on this one we selected medium. Because of the type of personal information that we're processing, the inherent risk is high. The residual risk is medium because of all the control measures in place, and the behavioral risk is low once again. Jade, before we head into our Q&A, I just quickly want to go into the action plan. There are certain actions that I have now added to the POPI portal to make sure that I am compliant and to make sure that I am limiting my exposure, mitigating my risk. So let's have a look at what action I've actually included over here. So once I select the action, I can see that I've added this increase security measures on DMS and pastel. Interesting. It's assigned Peter Mennen and the due date over there. If I go and edit this, and remember you can go and add your own action plans to your TPN POPI portal. Increase security measures on DMS and Pastel. Okay, we need to go and do that. Focus areas, people, the due date, this. High is the task priority, the status is assigned, percentage complete is 0, link people, myself, and then ensure correct access restrictions have been implemented to DMS and Pastel. Vitally important so that more people in the business at the school doesn't have access to information that they don't necessarily need access to. And you can go and save that. To add your own action, just click on the add button over there and follow all these short little tabs, and remember to click save. Wonderful. Jade, that brings us to the end of our formal session today. Do we have any questions?
We do have questions, Peter.
Go for it, please.
Ron Molman-Dreyer says that he has updated his terms and conditions to include provisions of POPI. He wants to know, does he need to have existing parents sign the new conditions?
Yes, I would definitely suggest so. We actually had this question about 2 weeks ago when we did the TPN POPI-Portal training for property, where clients asked us, do we need to go and update our contracts, our application forms, perhaps even our mandates with the owners? Now, at this point in time, because POPI is only being effected from the 1st of July, I would suggest you start getting these things in place already. You start getting your correct application forms and contracts in place with those specific parents. I would suggest that you go and update your contracts, and also once that implementation date comes, you go and update your parents on the different processes that you're following, perhaps also on the new agreements in place between the school and the parent, to make sure that they have garnered and given that correct consent to process the personal information, including the personal information of the child at the school.
Thank you, Peter. We have one more question from Lionel Buerta. He wants to know, what are the obligations for private schools to provide student and parent personal information onto the CMIS or SA SAMS portals?
Oh, interesting. Okay, so the SAMS portals and CMIS portals, I'm guessing that they are data management portals. If I've got this right, please let me know. So with your data management system, remember it's probably an internal system. If it is an external system that a third party is regulating, if it is a third party system like a debt collection service or anything like that, that you're actually sending information to, and that third party can actually see it, the responsibility at the end of the day still sits with the accountable person. So it still sits at the school. It's very important to note this. You still need to take responsibility and liability for all of the processing of that personal information, even if it's submitted to a third party. So you need to ensure that that third party is also POPI compliant through their processes, and that they are not necessarily sharing that information that you are submitting to them to other people that information shouldn't be seen by. So it's very important through this process to also vet your suppliers, vet the people that you are submitting information to, vet the people that you are actually processing the information through, so that at the end of the day, you as an accountable person, you as a responsible party as the school, is fully compliant in all of these different areas. Excellent, Jade.
Thank you, Peter.
No more
That's
questions.
all the questions we have today.
A short one today. Wonderful. It was great to take you through this POPI-Portal training today. Once again, module 4 of 7. Remember, we do still have 3 training sessions that is upcoming in the next couple of weeks, 5, 6, and 7. If you missed out on the first couple of modules, go back into the TPN Credit Bureau YouTube channel. Remember to like and subscribe the page, as well as ring the notifications bell, because then you'll get notified of any upcoming trainings that is also happening in the very near future. Have a fantastic day, everybody. Thank you very much.